Welcome. You're watching Conquered with I Miss Shally. Sitting with me today, she is a platinum-selling singer, actress, and model. She has conquered South Africa and most of Europe with her amazing blend of R&B, jazz, and African styles. She's the one and only Lira. Welcome.
Thank you.
It's good to have you here.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Lira, have you always wanted to be a musician?
Absolutely. Of course, I didn't always think it was a possible career, but I always wanted to be a musician. In fact, I wasn't encouraged to be a musician in the beginning, because I was told, nobody really sings for a living. But I suppose the passion overpowered the need to be logical. So yeah, here I am.
When you said you never thought it was possible, was it more of saying income-wise, or what exactly? Can you just tell us more about that?
Absolutely. I think I had the perception that I could only do it as a hobby. I was constantly reminded by my parents, for starters, that you can't sing for a living. So I never entertained it as a possible career until I was actually in a job market, or rather working full-time in the accounting department of the Morkels Group, of all places. But I worked in that environment for 2 years, and I remember how I just grew unfulfilled. Not all the money in the world or the position could satisfy this hunger that I suddenly felt. So one of the things that I was agonizing over was, okay, so if this isn't fulfilling, what am I going to do with my life? But I recognized that my description of fulfillment was me being on stage, writing music and performing, really. So I thought I needed a plan to figure out how I'm actually going to make a living out of music. So I drew up a 5-year plan. At the time, that sort of made sense to me, that I could do this in 5 years. And the idea was to get it out of my system and then get back to reality, as it were. So yeah, I devised the plan as to how I could imagine making a living out of music.
You said you drew up a 5-year plan. Do you mind sharing with us what was in that 5-year plan?
Absolutely. So the first year after quitting my job would be me developing my repertoire, writing music, finding producers that I resonate with, so creating the songs, and then approaching. At the time, my intention was to approach Ghetto Rough, who were the only label at the time that produced R&B, soul kind of artists. They were open to that sort of genre. And then year 2, release an album, hopefully tour across all of South Africa. Year 4, tour Africa, hopefully win some summers along the way. Year 3, explore a global career, ideally the United States. Year 5, hopefully have a huge hit, be a millionaire and retire and go back to being an accountant. When you're 22, it seems like a logical plan.
Yes. Within the first year, did you achieve what you had put in your 5-year plan?
Oh, absolutely not. When I served my notice, and then 2 weeks after that, I landed a record deal. So that was the easiest part. And I thought, the universe was working with me. Literally, that opportunity just dropped in my lap. It was the easiest thing to get signed. I just happened to be at the right place at the right time. My first record label was looking to go into R&B, and they were looking for a voice and a face to launch their first R&B release, and I just happened to be there at that time. I wasn't looking for that particular opportunity then, but I couldn't believe my luck. I was literally signed on the spot, and the next day I was on tour with the stable. However, it took 2 years for my first album to be released, simply because I was signed to a traditionally Kwaito label who wanted to explore R&B, but the effort and time and unique marketing approach that it needed, they sort of just waylaid it and focused on the stuff that was actually making money at the time. So that was very frustrating for me, considering I only had 5 years to spare. So I was growing more and more frustrated. And then at some point I was like, okay, so firstly, I had saved up enough money to survive for a year, because I felt it's logical that one can get oneself off the ground in a year. But my story didn't quite go that way. So by year 2, I was broke. I had moved back to my parents' house. I'd sold off some of my stuff. So it was getting a bit desperate. And then, of course, it did cross my mind that it's probably better to just look for a job. But I was like, I've sacrificed so much, and I'm going to come back into the job market with nothing to show for all these 2 years. So I picked myself up, and I was like, okay, you know, stop feeling sorry for yourself. Go for it again. And then I remember marching into the office of of the label owner and saying, okay, you can't ignore me now. We have to go into the studio. I'm ready. I've written the music, and here it is. Yeah, so I recorded my first album, and it was released in 2003 on May the 6th. That was 11 years ago.
Yes, and that was All My Love. And after you released All My Love, you went, should I say, quiet for a while. And you later released in 2006. What exactly was happening during that period?
The All My Love album had incredible airplay. All My Love in particular reached #2 in our South African equivalent of the billboards. And this was the first time that a South African track had received that much airplay to a point of reaching #2 in the country. So that was really exciting. However, and I also had 7 songs in high rotation out of a 14-track album, but people couldn't connect me to the music that they were hearing on the radio. So, and I remember the biggest shock to me. I was with another artist in her car, and my song went on, and she was like, "Oh my God, I love this song." And I looked at it and I thought, "Oh my God, she's not even aware that that's my song." And that's when I realized how the disconnect. You know, it wasn't with all the media. I mean, I think sure some of the work was done, but it wasn't communicated properly. And I remember I only sold 1,500 units of that album. I remember going into Galo, going to fetch all my posters and buying my own material and trying to sell it to shops and asking them to just have my music in there. And I'd be like, "I've got my poster, please, I've got like a whole box, just sell it. Even if you hold on to it and then you'll give me the money once you sell it." And they'd laugh at me, you know, and say, you know, this is not how the game works. And it was very frustrating in that I just felt unsupported. Sometimes I'd attend events alone. Yeah, just some difficulty in terms of that. But in retrospect, it was the greatest education I received in my life and in my career was in that time. I learned to be self-sufficient. I learned to make a plan, you know, to not rely on anyone else. I learned how to build my business from scratch. And so I found opportunities. Now that I had the music, I found opportunities everywhere where I could perform. So for 3 years, I was a fully fledged tax-paying musician who paid 5 salaries. But you wouldn't see me in the media, but I was working. And so for me, a sense of pride returned because I was my own boss in that sense. I had created a career for myself where I created sustenance not only for myself, but for my team members. And so by the time I released Feel Good, I had grown so much as a business person in the music industry that my deal was so much better and I was in control of my career.
So how did you manage? You said earlier, people could not connect to say that's, you know, oh, I love this song, but they could not connect it to say this is you who is singing the song. How did you manage to work on your brand to now make it, you know, connect?
Firstly, the first thing I did, I think, was just I focused on what I could do. So though some opportunities I could not get because of whatever the circumstance was, I focused on finding people who would give me the opportunity to perform. And once I performed, I'd have my music there to my cities to sell right there and then. So for me, the idea was to build a following from scratch, to literally breed an audience. So in 3 years, you know, I was gaining traction. So by the time I signed my first label, I was like, okay, so now people have seen me perform here and there. Now, as I put out an album, how do I want them to perceive me? So the first thing was to remove the clutter. I got rid of the braids. I wore my hair naturally. I started wearing clothes that I felt reflected me as an urban African. So I didn't want to be misunderstood. You know, I can't control how people react to me, but at least I was going to do what I could do in terms of packaging myself in as authentic a manner as I possibly could. Sony got my vision, they loved the album, and they were so supportive. And so by the time Feel Good came, I think people sensed that authenticity, and I mean, it became like a runaway success, you know? People loved the music, they just felt that difference, and it was just amazing. And yeah.
You know, what's interesting, you completed your accounting degree. You could just go knock on a couple of doors and get a job. And you decided to take the music career. Did financial-wise, while you were still trying to make it to reach your goal, did you make enough to keep you going? Or
in the beginning, absolutely not. It was actually quite difficult. And these are the times when your reason why you're pursuing something sustain you, because logic just says, what the hell are you doing? This makes no sense. But it also made a huge difference in how I handle money to this day. So the first thing I noticed was, you know, you live from gig to gig. So at the end of the month, you're not able to account as to what you've done with your money, because every little bit, you know, just disappears. It comes in and it goes towards something. So I felt I wasn't able to plan ahead. So the first thing I did was to not use my money as I get from gig to gig. I would wait until it's all in the bank so I could sort of look at it as monthly income. And once I did that, I would take a portion and pay myself a salary, so that some of it I could use to take advantage of opportunities for marketing, for career development in any way, and to pay for other little things that might come up, and of course to save. So I learned to do that with when I had little. So I would literally live on very little, but I'd be very frugal and very disciplined. And I found just by habitually doing that, and of course I had my, you know, it would be ups and downs, but what that did was, if I paid myself a salary and there was savings, the months where I would experience dips, I could draw from the savings and survive. So now, after a while, it became a case of I wasn't so desperate for survival. I could focus my energy on career development and not worry about where my next meal would come from. So I used little to create that sort of balance, and I've done that ever since. And I just think it's a great financial principle that anyone who's in the arts can implement into their own lives. And it also takes a lot of discipline, a lot of positivity. You can be your own worst enemy if your mindset is in the wrong space. You can really sabotage yourself if mentally all you do is feed yourself all that negativity. So I'm very careful what I feed my garden up here, as it were. Yeah.
You know, what's quite interesting, your parents kept on feeding you that you can't live on just being a musician. When you took that brave step, you know, leaving the accounting job, something which is more secure, taking the risk, what did they say about that?
My mom saw me, I use the word deteriorate, and what I mean is a spark in me disappeared. You know, just I would have to drag myself to work. There was just no drive in me. And she noticed how I was becoming, and how she said it was like I'm making her sick. You know, I just walk around moping, you know. She really said I was annoying her. So she was like, what's wrong with you? And that was a great opportunity for me to tell her that I'm no longer fulfilled in this job that I'm doing, and this is what I want to do. I want to, you know, pursue music. And again, she said, that's crazy. Nobody sings for a living. You don't do that for a living. So I said, well, on the contrary, I counted people like Brenda Fassie. She was popular doing her thing, and other artists that she respected. But more importantly, I presented my plan to her. I had a plan. And that made her realize that she can't argue with that. So she gave me her blessing, and that made a difference. For my mom to give me her blessing meant that when the world had beaten me and I was all scratched and bruised, I could always return home to lick my wounds and have a nicely cooked meal. You know, there was always the ability to go home and regroup. And I did that. So my mom was my greatest support at that time, because it's not easy. It really isn't easy. In that this industry is not so, you know, it's not like you become a doctor or an accountant for that matter. You study, you do your articles, and, you know, there's sort of a path that's laid out. With art and music, you sort of have to make it up as you go along, and you have to take opportunities that come up. And so yeah, it made a difference that I had my parents' blessing.
So when did you finally move out of your parents' house? When?
Oh, I eventually did. I was much older, actually. I was 25. I was 25. Considering I pursued my career at 22. So in that sense, everything for me was late in comparison to the average young person or musician. But evidently, it's never too late.
True. Would you say it's cool to be famous?
It depends. It depends. I just like to be me, actually. That's my favorite thing in the world. I just like to be me. Sometimes it's difficult to get around how people perceive me, because I like them to accept me as me first. Sometimes when you are famous, people, some of the certain human courtesies go out the window. You know, like please and thank you and hello, for that matter. People, you know, sort of talk about you and you're right there and things like this. And I'm just like, say hi to me, you know. I'm here, I'm a person. So some of that I don't enjoy so much, but I cope with it. And I suppose the nicest thing is that you get treated really nicely. You know, you just get like lots of little freebies and just get treated like a queen. So that's always quite nice.
You have stayed relevant in the market for a very long time. How have you managed to do that?
A productive artist is a relevant artist. Simple as that. You keep working, you keep putting work out, you stay relevant. Simple as that.
And what's amazing is you have managed to get into the overseas market, and they have accepted you very well. How did you conquer that?
With a plan. There's always a plan. When I look at my 5-year plan, the plan was always to become a global artist. So I've always been working with that end in mind. So the first thing to do was to understand the American market. And I couldn't possibly have done that without people in the States that understand their market better. So I reached out, spoke to a whole bunch of people. My first trip to the United States was just to suss it out, just to see if there's anyone interested to even speak to us. Through our connections with Sony, I met some amazing record labels and record label execs, people that have worked with some of the greatest artists in the world, to say, how do I get into your market, you know? To hear it from people that actually work it. So that research was really amazing. And then, you know, I sent my music around, and of course, when I shot my DVD, it was to provide me with a tool that I could offer to people to say, this is what I look like on stage, this is what I sound like recorded, this is me. So now I created tools to market myself. And out of that, I got an amazing publicist, an amazing manager, and a record label. And all of this work took 3 years, because it also takes resources to travel to the States with my whole band, to release the music, to market it, to tour. So I did it in little bursts. So the first time we did a mini tour to see if the Americans would accept me into their market. And the response was amazing. Every show we had was sold out. And that's the beauty of social media and the internet. So people were aware. You know, if I was marketed at their favorite venue, they could just go and Google and go. And a lot of them that came, they were like, girl, I had never heard of you before, you know. I just Googled you and I just loved what I saw, and I thought I'd come through with my girlfriends. And so that was amazing, you know. People were just curious. And because I had material that enticed them on their web, it created a bit of a buzz. And out of that opportunity, the BET nomination came through, the performance at the Obama inauguration. And I also did a tour with Baba Huma Sigela in the Virgin Islands, and that came as a result of the World Cup performance. So, you know, it's like you do your bit and opportunities come, and that's really how it's been.
Now you're such a big brand. Do you still have thoughts of going back and being an accountant?
Oh, absolutely not. Absolutely not. I mean, I think by the first by the time Feel Good came out, I was like, okay,
that's it.
Out the door with that plan. I mean, I was having such a great time. I can't imagine. Every single day is completely different. I'm in a different space, a different part of the world. I've been to 15 countries this year alone, and we're only at August. So, and by March, I was already at 15 countries. So, I mean, I couldn't imagine giving that up for anything. I'm having a great time.
And you're married.
Yeah.
How do you balance that off?
I work with my husband. Simple.
No conflict?
No, well, of course, we're human beings, but mostly it's wonderful. We both like what we do. We like each other. And so it allows us to also travel together. You know, often I look at other artists and I think, you know, you have to be a mom and a wife in one respect, and then you live your world as a musician in one area. The experiences that I have, I would be so sad if I couldn't share that with my husband. So I actually find myself fortunate that every little thing is there to experience it with me. So that makes it special.
Yes, and Lira, what would you say, you know, to the youth out there that, you know, they look up to you and one day they want to be good singers and achieve more or less what you have achieved? What message do you have to tell them?
I'm going to say it like this. Everything we've spoken about, I've included in my book, Her Story, right? And what I'm going to say firstly is, and it goes back to the title, create your own story. 11 years ago, I sat down and wrote down a vision of what I wanted to achieve. I created my story on paper and then stood up and went and lived it. So that's the first thing. Start with a vision. When I sat down all those years ago, I knew I wanted to be a global African. I wanted to be a global artist. I knew that I wanted to be a positive influence. I knew that I wanted to uplift the image of Africa. I knew that I wanted to sing with all my clothes on. And so, yeah, everything I've done has been to that end. So start with a vision in mind. Create your own story. Imagine what you want to see on the other side of when it's all said and done. What do you want to be remembered for? And that will influence the kind of choices you make, the kind of opportunities that you go for. It'll govern how you behave in everything that you do. There's no formula to this game. So be creative, be innovative, be willing to roll up your sleeves and do the work. It is your dream, so it's your responsibility. Keep, and I hate this word because there's no other way of saying it, but please keep positive. As a man thinketh, so shall his life be, right? So your thoughts influence how your life happens, and your attitude towards everything that happens to you will determine your altitude. So take it easy with yourself as well, but try to see the positive in every situation, including when you're down and out. In fact, in your darkest times is when you have your greatest lessons. And yeah, just keep going until you get there.
That's true. Lira, where can people get this book?
The book is available in every in stores across the country, every good bookstore, CUM, CNA, exclusive books, and all our concerts, we have it. And it's the first time that I've allowed my fans that close into my life. And it was really guided by the interaction that I have with my Facebook fans. You know, they ask me so many questions, and I find it's usually the same kind of things. So I thought, rather than responding to 1,000 posts a day, let me explain it all in a book. And if I can just show you, I've got pictures in there that I've never shared. I've got pictures of my wedding. Nobody ever saw my wedding day, but I've got pictures of that. I've got pictures of me growing up, the film that I did as well. I've got some fans, and I've got all the people that I've worked with over the years. And that's me at 12, and that's me at matric at 16. I matriculated at 16, and that was me on my 3rd birthday. So just really, this is her story. You know, people talk about history, but I was like, often what I'm realizing is I'm creating her story, and as I look back, it is my story. And And that's really the biggest advice I would ever give to anyone is create your own story.
Wow, Lira, thank you so much.
It's a great pleasure.
For being here with us. And viewers, do go and get this book. You find it in CNA exclusive books and all over the major bookstores in South Africa. And thank you for watching.